Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Next item on our agenda is debrief of the legislative session.
So we have a half an hour before Jill gets here, so
Okay.
we'll start this agenda item. We certainly will not finish it.
Okay.
So let's, the focus of our debrief from legislative session, Murray, do you want me to give the kind of factual background, and then I think you had some comments that you wanted to share? Okay. So I want to start with probably the most impactful bill to the Ethics Commission, and that is our budget bill. So I think you all have engrossed Senate Bill 2004 included in your packet. We're going to walk through this section by section. The reason that we're going to do that is because this is a budget bill, but the budget consists of sections 1, 2, and 3. Sections 4 through, I think it's 15, right? Nope, 18. Those are policy type provisions that were included in the Commission's appropriations bill. So we're going to walk through each of those. What I did for you in your memo is I have action items or things that the Commission then needs to follow up on in light of Senate Bill 2004. My debrief of legislative session is limited to kind of 2 bills. The reason that I did it that way is all the other bills that were directly affecting the Ethics Commission's operations either died in, I think everything died in the House. Nope, one of them died in the Senate. So they died in one of the houses, one way or the other. So let's dig into Senate Bill 2004, which is our budget bill. There was a lot of back and forth on this bill. As I've already told the Commission, the conference committee consisted of, from the Senate, it was Senator Davison, Senator Dever, and Senator Mathern. From the House side, it was Representative Hansen, Representative Martinson, and Representative Lauser on the conference committee. The conference committee met, I want to say 6 times. Is that correct? Probably about 6 times. I think I made a mental note. Maybe it was 7 in the end. But Senator Mathern did chair the conference committee. I was really appreciative of how he chaired the conference committee. I think he tried to build consensus around each of the items that the houses disagreed on and tried to improve the process with the policy portions. So if you look at section 1 of our appropriation, you have our base level funding, which is calculated by OMB. You have additional enhancements or adjustments that were made. And then you have our ultimate appropriation. I don't want the Commission to worry about the new and vacant FTE pool. This new and vacant FTE pool is a legislative creation. We abide by it. It doesn't fundamentally affect how we function as a Commission. It's just that our funds for FTEs, I'm oversimplifying this, but it's put in a separate fund in OMB. And then as we need that money, it is transferred into the Ethics Commission's spending authority. So don't worry about when you see new and vacant FTE pool, but you will see our final budget appropriation came out as $1,368,016, and our full-time equivalent positions or our staff maintained at 3. So what was not included in this 1.3, close to $1.4 million, it did not include either money or an FTE for education and communication. In the end, there was a concession about the education FTE in the conference committee, and that was taken out in the Senate version, and they all agreed on that. It also does not include funds for rule implementation. I want to talk briefly about why this was not included. This was not included. Rules implementation, We have funds included in our budget for advertising of rules. What we don't have in the commission's budget is if we need a new IT solution, if we need to produce educational materials, and as a consequence of adopting a rule, there are costs associated with that to the commission. That has never been included in any ethics commission budget to date. So when we came up with the $50,000 that we requested for rules implementation, we pulled that number out of the sky. There was no rhyme or reason. This could have been 200,000, it could have been 10,000, it could have been $1 million. But we just thought 50 million, or 50,000, excuse me, not 50 million. 50,000 was a good place to start, and we would have earmarked that specifically for rulemaking. The legislature had a problem with the fact that we didn't have the data to support that. So what we're going to have to do this biennium in order to get that come next legislative session is really to create a record or to make sure that we document any costs associated with rules implementation. So that's going to be something that it did not make it into the budget. I understand why, because we really didn't have a data-driven analysis on that. It was your executive director pulling a number out of the sky, and I fully admitted that to the legislature. I didn't want to give them the impression that that was a well thought out number. I think it was an educated guess. So that did not make it into our appropriation. The things that did make it into our appropriation, if you remember back, we bucketed this as 9 separate asks of the legislature. Most of those were included in the governor's recommendation and then adopted by the legislature. The one that was included in the governor's recommendation that the legislature did not fully adopt was the case management system. We were asking for an initial $135,000 for a case management system with a $60,000 ongoing cost for that. Both governors gave that to us in their recommendation, but the legislature reduced that to a one-time cost of $50,000. We did have a lot of good discussion about how that case management system is going to be developed, what that's going to look like. I have talked with Corinne Mock, who is the head of NDIT, and had some discussions. The idea of a case management system or the need for one is not unique to the Ethics Commission. There are many other state agencies who need a case management system, and they don't have them. So what we didn't want to do was create something that was unique to the Ethics Commission, that was expensive to maintain, and could not be used by other agencies. Oops, sorry, Logan. So I want to make sure that I keep in contact with Corey Mock. I keep wanting to say Representative Mock, but he's not Representative Mock anymore, about the development of that case management system. So the other thing on the case management system is this is going to take some time. It's going to take a significant amount of time, of both my time and Alicia's time, to get this underway, and how we approach this from a strategic standpoint. We do think that we're probably going to have to do an RFP for this. That's going to take several months. We probably are going to be well into the first biennium before we really can get this going. We have been looking very closely at what New Mexico has done because their system is so straightforward and simple. It also reminds you of a case docketing system. If you've ever looked at the court's docketing system, it's very similar to that. So we think that that would be a good kind of a model. Thank you for the word. I was slipping my mind. Okay. Other things that were included in this $1.4 million budget is we did receive $24,434 for a workload increase for the operations administrator position. That initially was not included by the Senate and had not been included by the House. I believe that the Senate likely that was an oversight. Senator Davison confirmed that to me, that he thought that that had been included. Senator Dever also expressed that he thought it was included as well. So did Representative Hansen. So we did make sure that that was included. That is going specifically towards salary and benefits for Alicia as our administrator position. They also approved our increases in software and subscriptions. As we've already talked about, we do have a subscription to Westlaw that costs money. We did add additional travel expenses, and we have a piece of furniture that was appropriated. That's a one-time. You will see in section 2, there is an office furniture one-time expenditure of $2,348. We currently do not have, we have very little furniture in our office. We have a very small office, but we do need to get some storage in place. And so this is for a cabinet that will go where the current table with a clock and plastic forks and random things kind of is right now, that we store things underneath. This will be so that everything can be kept in storage. So we've already gotten a quote on that. It will match the rest of our furniture that we already have, and we will get that going as soon as that money is appropriated. Again, we did not get the FTE, so we are left with 3 FTEs. There was some discussion about whether there should be inclusion of money or instead in lieu of an FTE so that we could use it maybe to contract somebody to help us with education and training. That, however, did not end up in the final bill. In the final days of the session, the Ethics Commission's budget was one of the last bills to pass. On Friday, was it at 5:30, I think, is when it went through both the houses. It has yet to be signed by the governor as of this morning. I'm sure that that will happen soon. And other than that, that is the appropriations, meaning the money portion of our budget. Are there any questions on the money portion before we go into the policy discussions?
What does RFP stand for?
Yes, there you go.
What is it?
Requests for proposal.
So we work with procurement to put a request for proposal out there so that anybody who can bid on that, and then they submit bids.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that can be from a private entity that does that, or NDIT can bid on that project as well.
So how is that advertised then?
It's through the procurement website, and then there's a like a notice that goes out to anybody who's a state bidder or who has registered to get those notices.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments on the appropriations in Senate Bill 2004? This is where I will comment that there were many times, particularly in the Senate side, that there were very specific questions about numbers, and Alicia was able to describe with a lot of accuracy where those numbers came from, and that was really great information to have. I think that Alicia has calculated the numbers to a far more in-depth extent than the legislature asked of us. So that was good. We were over-prepared, I would say, for the financial questions. So the policy portions of Senate Bill 2004 start in section 4. Logan, I'm going to hand it over to you to walk us through the policy stuff.
Sure. I'm actually going to jump to the end of the bill at section 18 because I'm going to reference it as we go throughout. On the emergency clause that applies to sections 4, 5, 10, 11, 14, and 15. So with that emergency clause, as soon as the governor signs the bill into law, those provisions become effective immediately rather than August 1st, like every other piece of legislation, except for the appropriations become effective on the new fiscal year. The policy pieces become effective on August 1st unless there is an emergency clause.
So I actually checked on that yesterday.
Did you?
So the whole, because it's an appropriation bill, the whole thing becomes effective July 1st. Is that your understanding of it as well?
Well,
Because I had that.
the emergency
Yeah.
clause becomes effective immediately, to be determined on the rest of it, but it sounds like it may be July 1st instead of August 1st. I think you're right. I just need to refresh myself on that. But keep that in mind, starting with section 4. So this one, the emergency clause applies to it. Because it did pass by 2/3 in both houses. So section 4 is an amendment to a criminal statute, actually, not ethics commission code. But this is an amendment to 12.1-13-02, which is an offense for speculating or wagering on official action or information. What the legislature did here, if you look at the top of page 3, starting at line 6, they added an immunity provision. We've discussed this before, but they added an immunity provision for members of the Legislative Assembly for a potential violation of this section of the Century Code. If the key language here is in subsections B and C under 3 there, if the legislator votes in the Senate or House on a piece of legislation and they adhere to the conflict rules of their respective House to disclose what they call a personal or private interest, a potential conflict of interest, then this immunity under the new provisions would attach to that legislator for voting on the bill, as long as they declare conflict. Any questions on that one? If not, I'll just keep moving along.
Can I make a comment on it? So just to refresh the commission's recollection, currently the Senate and the House have differing conflict of interest rules. So the House has an additional provision. They define things slightly differently. So when we say the individual adhere to a legislative conflict of interest rule requiring an individual to disclose, it is per the House, but just keep in mind that those are currently different. So just a note.
Well, and it comes into play later in the bill.
Yes.
And then moving to section 5, this is also an emergency provision. This one provides an affirmative defense more broadly for legislators when they vote on legislation, if they follow, again, those same chamber-specific rules for disclosing a conflict regarding the legislation. And that's not, the previous section was for a specific offense. This one is more broadly for any criminal offense. That's in subsection 1 there. Now, subsection 2 is the potentially problematic subsection for the commission's purposes. This is the one that says informal advice from a staff member of the Ethics Commission. Reliance on the advice is an affirmative defense in a prosecution for an offense arising from the individual voting on a measure in a legislative committee, the Senate, or the House of Representatives. So this was originally part of a policy bill, House Bill 1505. We worked with the sponsors of that piece of legislation to change the language a little as that moved through the process, and I believe it was amended before it was ultimately killed, because we flagged this informal advice piece as an issue, because that's just problematic in general. We're not individual public officials' attorneys, so when they come to us to ask a question, we don't provide them advice like an attorney-client relationship. We point them to specific education materials, our trainings. We tell them, go read the rules, or maybe go read this rule, but we don't give them a yes or no answer. And this piece in the bill kind of simplifies it.
Have them come in.
This this subsection kind of simplifies that issue. It tries to make it more black and white than it really is. So as we move forward, the commission will have to adopt a policy, or I think it would look better as a rule, it would be better as a rule, excuse me, on when the commission would weigh in on these issues and what that would look like. What is informal advice? Because that's not defined in the bill. So the commission should really take the lead there and define it. So we're not running into issues when we have staff members who are attorneys, Rebecca and I, but also other staff members who, if a legislator would come into our office, say, well, I spoke with so-and-so and they told me this was okay. Again, you're running into a situation where one person could say something happened and another person could say, no, the discussion was this. And this piece in the bill doesn't take all of that into account.
No, it's, I'm not saying anything against you because you're not an attorney, but if they talk to Alicia in the hallway, that's informal advice. I suggest you not give that kind of advice, but I mean, it is not very clear.
No, it's not run, and even for Rebecca and I as attorneys, we may have a conversation with the legislator, and their recollection of it could be completely different than her or mine.
Right.
So that's an evidentiary issue for the courts then on top of it. But even before we get into that issue, I've spoken with Rebecca and Alicia to some extent, but when this becomes a piece of law, we shouldn't be having those conversations given the lack of clarity that this bill presents.
Yeah.
Without some formal process to it. The alternative is going to be, if we get informal questions, it's going to be, well, you need to request an advisory opinion moving forward because of this law. Because we don't have any processes in place. So it's an issue the commission will need to look at moving forward and how we approach that issue. I know we've spoken about informal guidance rules already to some extent, but that was also in the context of this new process that we were proposing. That was also killed in House Bill 1360, so we will need to reevaluate that moving forward and how we want to approach that issue when legislators come to us and ask questions. But for the time being, it's going to be, well, you're not going to get an answer unless you request an advisory opinion now. Assuming this becomes law.
The frustration is, I believe this is intentionally made, worded the way it was worded.
To create that ambiguity.
Yes.
Because we had, or you had, when they killed, or when 1505, I think, when it got amended, right? We got it fixed, right? Or
We had
clarified, I guess is a
it
better word.
clarified.
Yeah. And then they didn't pick up that language.
Well, in our Bill 1360 provided fixes in order to expedite the process, and they killed it. So, and then there's the other issue of, don't we have to be very careful on providing informal advice, and because we have attorneys, that could be perceived as legal advice. Giving, what's that term? Giving legal advice when they're not authorized to do so.
So that's where the informal guidance rule that we've been talking about took care of that issue.
Try to take care of that, yeah.
Yeah, because then the guidance was coming from, the commission, not necessarily from the staff based
Right,
on how we
exactly.
structured it. But then I think the question that we need to think about and that we're going to have to discuss is that informal guidance? Is that how we're going to interpret that, or how are we going to do that?
So when we discussed it as part of that larger proposal, informal guidance was defined. The issue here is that it's put in the bill, informal advice. That's not defined anywhere in the bill itself or otherwise in Century Code. So the answer, I guess it's an easy answer for now. The answer is no, you need to request an advisory opinion. And most of those answers are going to have to be in writing because it creates, again, evidentiary issues if we were ever to find ourselves in court. It creates a liability for the commission and its staff. So that has to be the answer at this time.
Great, so we're waiting for this to be signed by the governor?
I just checked, it has not been signed by the governor.
So essentially, there's no way we can fix this unless we could get the governor to understand or no?
Well, he's an attorney. If he looks at it really closely, he should understand that. But
I mean, but can we point it out?
Trouble is, since the legislative process is over, so
Okay.
there's nothing we can do
Well,
other than setting up our own rules and our own,
yeah,
within our constitutional purview to clarify things. So we can do it that way. But
unless he,
the governor and legislature, it's already done, so that they can't tell.
So Ron said, I mean, he could veto it. He can line item veto
Yeah,
a
that's-
budget.
That's assuming he hasn't signed it.
Assuming he hasn't signed it already. I checked, sometimes it takes a while for it to get updated. But
but we have no right contacting him. We're not
Exactly.
legislators. Murray, that'd be correct, wouldn't it?
You can, agencies can contact the governor and ask him to do something.
Oh, okay.
So we could contact the governor and say, hey, this is sitting someplace in your office mail system for your signature. We have some concerns.
But there are some Supreme Court decisions affecting the line item veto of the governor. And I forget what they are right now. But
Yeah.
Governor Link started, did some line item, Olson, I think, did some line item vetoing, and I just don't recall the exact details.
it's not an issue that we've researched too in depth lately. We did earlier in the session.
Yeah, I guess just to add, legislators we did have conversations about this being a problem. At the time, there were other more problematic issues in the bill. And this is one that we believe we can fix. We have an answer to it currently. It's no, you're not going to get what this contemplates for the time being. So there's ways to work with it because it's in there, assuming it's in there when this is law, but
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
no, but it's an issue we need to be aware of and how to address it going forward.
Right.
Just a comment, I've been an attorney over 50 years, and the concept of informal advice just drives me crazy because is it curbside advice? Is it advice at the grocery store? What kind of advice it is? Because as an attorney, I've had situations where somebody has given me a state of facts. I may state something based on those facts, and then later learn those are not facts.
Exactly.
Yes.
I had that happen in my law office.
Yeah, and
Number of
so
times.
it's just the concept of informal advice is problematic. And what I heard during the legislature, our legislators saying, well, we go to the ethics commission, and we have a specific question, and it's yes or no, and they won't tell us. And basically, they want you to give informal advice right there on the spot. And I just have real problems. I've been burned on that, so.
So what we had proposed in the amendment to 1505 was that it needed to meet the facts that in order to get the affirmative defense, that the facts presented to the commission staff was in line with the actual
Like
facts.
the advisory opinion.
Like the
statute.
advisory opinion statute, so it mirrored that. So we prevented issues like what Murray is talking about,
And
but that didn't make it in this version.
I think the amendment said too, that if the informal advice would be issued pursuant to rules
Yep.
adopted by the commission. So again, that's an option here, but it's not written into what they put into the bill. I also can't envision any instance where, like you say, the curbside advice, the supermarket, where it's going to be something that we orally say to a legislator. So going forward, it all has to be written, no matter what it looks like.
But Logan, it's not what you think you orally said, it's what they think.
Yes, exactly. So those conversations are going to be very short where they raise those issues. It's going to be, you need to request an advisory opinion if you want a yes or no answer.
How many times have you had somebody say, but I thought I heard you say?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so at some point, the commission, well, should be talking about issuing an official statement of some sort that we won't be having those discussions. Because once this becomes law, we cannot have those discussions.
That's section 1 of the policy.
Okay.
Should we, well, I guess 2 sections of the policy.
That's a good break point.
That's a good break point to let Jill talk to us for a little while.
I was gonna say, sorry if I interrupted here, guys. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hello, good morning. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Jill Mugas. I'm an HR business partner. I work at OMB in their HRMS division. So what and I partner with the Ethics Commission as their HR VP. So I'm very excited, and I do love working with Alicia, Rebecca, and Logan too. But what my job is I partner with those smaller agencies that don't have like a strategic HR business partner within that agency to kind of help with that HR gap. So, if you ask me what I do, I don't know. No, but I help with like workforce planning, any staffing changes. I help them like create those vacancy announcements, to post it, interview questions, kind of like all through that whole talent acquisition process there. Any employee relation issues, there may be none here. Okay. Performance management. Also those employee engagements, things like that. I have more of those strategic results. I have been in my position for a little over 2 years with OMB in their HRMS division. Prior to that, I did work at another state agency for 10 years in their HR department. And that agency was a North Dakota Workforce Safety and Insurance, so WSI. So, any questions that you have for me? Or
What's your last name?
Mugas. Oh, I didn't say that. I do apologize.
That, you did say it, but
Oh,
I
okay.
couldn't get it.
Okay, Mugas. Yes.
Mugas.
Mugas, yes.
Yeah, okay,
Very Scandinavian, so, yeah.
okay.
Up in the, my husband, I blame my husband, but more in like the Sherwood area.
Okay, what's your maiden name?
My maiden name is Pressler.
Pressler.
Yes.
You should have kept that.
What, give up a Scandinavian name for something regular?
I know, I went from very German to very Scandinavian, so.
I'm sorry. I'm done.
You're done? Okay.
I'm done with my
Well, that was
questions.
your question. That was perfect. See, I can answer that. Any other questions?
So you'd be the one we'd go to then if we had questions regarding like evaluations,
Yes.
HR,
Yes.
so anything.
Yes.
Well, we didn't get to this time, but if we had an FTE to advertise,
Yes, I would be your point of contact to help you with that.
Okay.
Yes. And I do have cards if you would like my card. I can give it to everyone here.
So Jill started with being our HR business partner, I think it was a little over a year ago. Before that, we had Sarah Leno, so she helped get you guys established, and I think you met
Yes.
with her several times.
Yes,
And so I wanted you guys to meet Jill, because this is if we have HR questions, I go to Jill frequently, send her questions. Can I do this? Can I not do this?
Yes.
What is the protocol? So that way we ensure that we are following all of the HR processes for the state.
Yeah.
And Jill and I meet probably I think every other month,
Every
maybe.
other month, maybe. And one thing I do, because I do understand, honestly, every agency is different and everything like that. So I do, when Rebecca and I talk, I do kind of go into the lines of this is what is an admin code, this is Century code, kind of make sure we stay on those lines. But we also talk about what is best for the Ethics Commission, the agency in general too, so. Yep. Any other questions?
What else can you tell us?
I know. Like what?
So this just is your opportunity to introduce yourself to us?
Yep.
Okay, because I remember Sarah coming in.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sarah helped quite a bit when you guys were hiring an executive director the first time, and
Yeah.
when we hired, I think when you guys hired me,
Mhm.
and maybe Logan even. Was that still Sarah?
Oh, it was still Sarah.
That was still
Yeah.
Sarah, yep.
I
And
think
so,
Logan and Alicia.
and
too.
Alicia, yep.
Yeah.
So we transitioned to Jill, and she's helped us do our intern,
Yep.
get the job posted, and then she also is the one who helps me make sure that I'm reviewing, doing our performance evaluations and the employee engagement surveys correctly. But it takes us in our office not very long to do our employee engagement. Do you maybe want to talk about what that is and why we don't get the data that other agencies get?
Yes. So the employee engagement survey, we currently partner through Gallup, and it kind of has what's considered the Q12. Okay. So what it's not really a employee satisfaction survey, but an engagement. So like people that come to work engaged, or people are motivated and want to do a good job and everything like that. And so some of those questions are kind of like, my opinions count. There's that dreaded question of, I have a best friend at work. Well, yeah, no, you don't technically work with your BFF, but do you work in a team that you can go to when issues kind of come up and stuff like the support and everything like that? Kind of goes into development too, and kind of things like that. It kind of comes up like that, okay? So the state of North Dakota, we do that, and then we can kind of take a look at it as a state and as a whole. And usually you can drill it down at an agency level. Unfortunately, you do need like 4 or more people that participate. And so unfortunately, with only an agency with only 3 FTEs, I can't drill down to this level. However, one thing that Rebecca and I can do is we can kind of take a look at the questions, but also take a look at what you guys are facing as an agency and what can we do. And I know with you guys, it's really that burnout of making sure, because you're only 3 people, so the work doesn't stop, unfortunately. And what can we do to kind of help that and kind of progress, and also progress like the agency as a whole to kind of move forward? Because I think when you kind of have that, you kind of get bogged down into those day-to-day just trying to make it through the day and everything. Yeah. And so we kind of take a look at that, what we're going to work on, like things like that to kind of forward.
So do you help Rebecca do I guess, I hate to say it this way, but I have to say it this way, the quantity of the work. How do we discern that?
How much work we have? Jill does not help us
I
with
do not
that.
help with that,
Why not?
unfortunately.
She does
Like what
take,
an HR person should be.
she does take some of the work off our plates when it comes to HR stuff. So
Okay,
she
yeah.
sends out form letters for us. She does all the background stuff so that we get to do the meaningful portion of hiring or interviewing, and she takes care of the logistics, making sure that it gets posted. That way we don't have to go in and do that.
I remember when we hired Rebecca, we had to follow this protocol of not knowing who the person was and having the person answer questions in a certain way so that they couldn't be identified, or we couldn't identify them.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that gone now?
It's still intact.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
thought that was a very awkward way of trying to hire someone,
yep,
you know?
yep. No, and that's kind of goes into like previous legislative sessions, and I can understand where you're coming from, because when you look at something, you want to know their name and everything like that. But then when you're kind of, because you have to rate and score to kind of determine your finalists, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we could even decide if somebody was an attorney or not. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't there at that time. But hopefully they would say they're an attorney when you're reviewing their resume or something like that.
And I think I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
No.
I think, Ron, back then, we were trying to decide if we needed to hire an attorney or if they could be,
Yeah.
or if the background be more broad.
Right. Okay.
Right,
Gotcha.
yeah.
And that's a
We
little
were
different.
playing that
Yeah,
thing of, well, what should we have?
yeah.
What is most needed in
Yep,
this role?
yep.
Yeah.
We were pretty stupid back then.
Yeah,
You know,
kind
and
of ignorant.
the chair of the committee was especially stupid.
It was him.
And I can get that. I can get that when you're trying to figure that out. But yeah, when you're kind of filling a position, you kind of have to see what do you need
Yeah,
to do the job.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have those conversations a lot with my other agencies too.
Mhm.
Cindy, do you want me to ask your question that you had earlier about the retention and the?
Yeah,
Okay. So we adopted, per our conversation earlier this week, we went and adopted that bonus
Okay.
pay or bonus policy.
Yep.
We just did that. And so one of the questions that Cindy had is, first of all, she asked if the performance bonus can exceed $1,500. And so Logan was able to answer that one. He was able to pull up the statute, so that was good. But the other question then that she had is whether the commission can do both a performance bonus and a retention bonus. So that would be the question that Cindy had.
Yes, you can.
And they could each be for 50.
Performance bonus is maxed out at 1,500.
Retention.
Retention is different. So that, what majority of the agencies do that I work with, they usually do like 1 month's salary as a retention. And that was something we agreed upon, where like, and we're providing you with a retention bonus because you have a skill set that would be hard to, replace. And then they would do agreed upon time of the retention. So usually what we kind of see is, I see like 1 year, 2 years. And if they were to leave voluntarily within that time, it would be prorated for them to pay back a portion of that bonus. So if like say we do a 2-year one, they leave like a year after, they would have to pay back half of that bonus that was provided. So,
It's a very good description.
very good description.
We have not yet done retention
Yeah.
bonuses, so that's good to have that understanding of how that works. Yep.
That's not something you do arbitrarily. Does the person have to be seeking other positions?
You can do it at any time.
You can just do it at
There's
any
no-
time.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can, I wouldn't say give it every single year, but like
Mhm.
kind of reviewing, you look at a skill set, like you have a skill set that would be hard you want to retain and be hard to replace. Here's your retention bonus. Yeah,
Mhm.
Is there some sort of formal agreement that goes with that?
I do
There is
have
a-
it, yeah.
You do have one. Okay.
Do you wait for the employee to come forward and ask for it?
If you want to know my personal opinion, it's always kind of nice to give it to them without them expecting
Oh,
it.
That's a skill set or experience.
It can be experience, skill
Yeah,
set,
okay.
yeah.
And that, I think we included that in the
Yeah.
policy.
Criteria.
Yes.
Criteria.
Yeah, it's outlined.
There's
in
a
the
reason
policy.
why it's that policy's
how about retaining commissioners?
pretty. They haven't had anything like that.
We might need to adopt such
We
a
might- I know,
policy.
we
We
might
might have
have
to take
to.
a look at that.
Just guilt them into it.
Yeah, we just guilt them into it.
Or else it's one of those agreements like, no, you have to stay. Like, so anything else, guys? Or?
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure. So, yeah, nice meeting you too. At any time, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help and always happy to answer any questions you may have. So,
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
Thanks for coming and thanks for all of your help for many things.
oh, you are welcome. It's my pleasure. So, all right. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Same to you.
Back to, Dave, do you want us to go jump back into Senate Bill 2004?
Yes, please.
Okay. Logan, keep on
Keep on going.
going.
Yeah, I guess, when we're done, we can define how we want to move forward with that informal advice piece.
So maybe I want to just
Do you want to do
comment.
it now?
Maybe, I guess I'll defer to the commission. So you can see on page 4 of your memo, we have each of the policy changes on the memo, up there. So in the memo, there's a note about which policy change. So then what we did is we went down, and as a consequence of the policy changes and the appropriation changes to some extent, what I did is just provide recommendations for things that we need to discuss and then make a decision on as a commission of how we're going to address that. So these are more action items that stem from the policy. So if you look at, I should have numbered these instead of bullet pointed them so I could refer to the number, but the second bullet point is define or have that discussion, just as Logan talked about, informal guidance by the commission staff as referred to in subsection 5 or section 5. And determine whether and how to implement commission staff providing, quote, informal advice. So those are the action items that align to different sections above.
Okay, but defining informal guidance is going to be a bit problematic, isn't it? Can you write that in such a way so it delineates informal guidance in such a way that it's clear and we can't get in trouble for it?
Well, I think we make a rule, right? We make a rule that refers to this.
I think that was your suggestion,
Well,
right?
it's not going to be something that happens overnight where all of a sudden
Yeah.
at the June meeting, we'll have something ready to go. It's going to take some research in defining what the guardrails are for how that will operate, given the language that was implemented in the statute. So I think that action item is more of a long-term,
Yep.
right, longer-term goal. But in the short term, I think the commission should adopt a statement or a policy of some sort that, given this piece of legislation or when this goes into effect, this is how we're going to handle when legislators come to the commissioners or commission staff with questions. So so it's never a question if this is going to be applicable without some formal rule, whatever form it takes shape of how we're going to handle this. Before that, we need something in place that this is just not going to happen. Yes.
Provide some boundaries.
Yes. And the boundary currently is going to be no.
Yeah.
It's not going to.
Right.
But you may not get a request for months now because they've adjourned. Unless they come back in a special session, it'll be several months before they even start thinking about legislation. The interim meetings.
I think we have some time.
Yeah, but there's also the interim. So if you look at this, it says from voting on a measure in a legislative committee. Well, measure is also not defined, so is that a motion in the committee? Maybe, maybe not. But also, I don't know how soon they're going to come back and start holding those interim committee meetings. So it's something we need to be cognizant of as soon as, my advice would be as soon as the law takes effect. Somebody might, is it likely? Maybe not.
You're saying to at least issue a statement or have a
Yeah,
policy
this is how
adopted.
we are
This is how we're
handling
gonna
this
handle
piece
it
of
for now.
legislation in the interim, no pun intended. That'll likely be in days if the governor signs it here. Only has 15 days, I believe, to sign things, so sooner rather than later. Move on to the next section. Section 6. This is,
Before you go on to 6, you want us to adopt something today?
maybe if you just give us direction to adopt a statement regarding, we don't have anything together yet, or maybe we could get it ready for you for tomorrow to adopt, but just some guidance on what you'd like us to do there, given the discussion.
Like to be anything such as, like you said right now, like the formal guidance would be no, requesting an advisory opinion, right? That would be one.
Yeah. We need
One
some
to-
form of canned statement, essentially. That's what I'm gonna call it, a canned statement that this is how we're handling things. Or if somebody comes to us with a question, well, you need to see this statement on our website, given this piece of legislation.
I think that's perfectly legitimate to say, is that because of the way the legislation is written, the only option we have is to issue an advisory opinion.
Yes.
Okay.
For now,
For now.
right?
Depending on what we learn as we look into it.
Okay.
But currently it's, yes, you need to request an advice, just so everybody's on the same page. If anybody comes to us, everybody's aware, it's public knowledge that this is the response you're going to get.
Yeah.
That no, you need to request an advisory opinion. We're not even going to discuss the facts with you at all.
Any thoughts, comments, concerns? We can draft something to that effect.
But you don't have to work late tonight to do it.
No,
So we're trying to prevent any more late night for a while.
We'll talk about that. Want to move on?
Yeah, move on to section 6. So this is where we actually get into the ethics chapter of the Century Code, where they're changing things. Starting with the definition section, this is a positive change that was part of other proposals where they change the term accused individual to respondent. So now it'll match the complaint rules, where we don't use the term accused anymore. Same definition, just different term. Question section 7, again, same thing here, they're just updating it throughout the Century Code. I believe it's the same thing with section 8
And 9.
and 9.
So there's no other changes in those sections
Other than the term.
other than the term.
In section 10, this is also an emergency clause provision. This is about the informal resolution process for complaints. Again, the language is updated there for respondent, but then on the top of page 8, the sentence is added. If the informal resolution process between the respondent and the complainant is unsuccessful, the commission may work with the respondent to settle and close the matter. So I think the easiest way to explain this is it complicates the complaint process, but in a good way. It adds another step in the process, but it's a positive step because the commission still has to go through that informal resolution process where we offer both the respondent and the complainant a chance to mediate, to settle the complaint between them. Now, if that doesn't work under this provision, then the commission can step in and say, we're just going to work with the respondent to settle and close the matter. So with the previous proposals with 1360, it was, well, we'll just replace the commission in that process completely. So you do one settlement process and you could do it whenever, and the commission would take charge of that when the complainant is out of it. With what the legislature did, the complainant is still in, we still do the first step where We try to bring both of them to the table and resolve it. If that's unsuccessful, then the commission can just step in and do it themselves or itself. I don't think it's gonna change much how the informal resolution process currently operates. I still think that'll be pretty unsuccessful, especially when a respondent knows that the commission can step in and in probably most cases be more reasonable than the complainant is being. So they have an opportunity to settle it twice. Arguably, the commission is going to be the more reasonable entity to settle it with.
I have a question about this. When the complainant files a complaint, can the form say you wish to participate in the informal resolution, yes or no? If so, check here. That may be a way to immediately say, well, we're skipping the process because the complainant won't participate. Then when they issue the complaint is referred to the respondent, could there be a separate box in there? Do you wish to participate in informal resolution, yes or no? If there's a no, you just move on. And just if one of them doesn't want to participate, you just skip the process. Can you do that?
We can.
Yes.
Would it require a change in the rule or just a change in the form?
I believe it's just a change in the form. We've updated the informal resolution form a couple of times, and that was really just to make it easier to fill out. The way it currently works is we don't send it out until after initial review is completed, in case we're going to dismiss it prior to then, but.
And then there are two ways to do that. That's to opt in or opt out. And so that they would have to either expressly opt in, and if they don't do it, or expressly opt out.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Maureen?
Yeah.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm done.
I apologize.
No, I'm done.
Based on the language of the statute, I think it would probably be better to have an opt-out system because it says we shall attempt. But that is a change that we could make to the complaint form early on and instead of the current resolution, informal resolution form. So I just asked Alicia, I whispered to her, will that cost us any money to make that change? Right? Because that's one of the questions, right? And I will let her answer with the response about the job forms.
Our complaint forms are one of the only forms we're still doing through job forms, and that system we are taking over in July 1. So we'll internally make changes to
For free.
form. Right.
We will, that
Not for free because we are taking on the job form subscription fee, but we received that in next biennium from legislature.
Yeah, as part of our subscriptions.
Correct.
So basically, the money is already allocated to make that change come July 1.
And it would be possible for some kind of form for the respondent to opt out at an early stage.
So
The respondent we'd have to think about that one a little bit more.
the respondent's a little more complicated because we don't ask them to respond until after that initial review stage because of, I don't know what our percentage is, but
About 50.
a majority of, or not a majority, a large percentage of complaints are summarily dismissed. So if we have a respondent who is preparing their response, we don't want to waste their time preparing a response when there's a 50-50 chance, give or take, that it'll be dismissed when they're trying to put work in to respond.
When a complaint is forwarded to the respondent, can there be a request at that point, do you or do you not want to participate? Which could come back.
That's current operating procedure. They get the form at that stage.
Yep.
So I think it might, we'll review it, but I think it might make more sense to start with the complainant because then you have an answer whether you're doing informal resolution or not, potentially. If the complainant says no, then it's off the table. You just move to now the commission trying to settle something. right?
Yep, that's
Thank you.
correct. I was silent because it was correct. Yes.
And then there's, I guess, two other issues that come up with this change to the Century Code. One is, well, what does it look like when the commission settles something with a respondent? There should be some standardized policy, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, that in these types of cases, the commission, let's say it's the first complaint with a particular respondent, we will settle things this way. Now, let's say we get a second complaint, it's the same issue, we'll settle the thing if it's a gifting issue. First violation, this is how we'll attempt to settle or negotiate something. Here's the second offense or violation, potential violation. This is how we'll try to attempt to settle something on behalf of the commission, just so it's standardized and you don't have different settlements from respondent to respondent. Anything to add on that?
No, so I think if you look at the action items that I've outlined for the commission, it is in light of section 10 to develop what is called, I called it settlement standards. It could also be settlement guidelines, and make these public. So ensure that both the respondent and the commission and the public are aware of what the guidance or what the general,
What the ask is going to be.
yes,
of
what
the
the ask is going
respondent
to be.
if they're trying to settle with the commission. So I think once the commission standardizes those, you'll also see a decline in what, in informal resolution between the complainant and the respondent, because they can say, well, the complainant's asking me this, but I know because the commission has publicly issued their guidelines for settlement that the commission will ask me to do this instead. So I'd rather agree to that than whatever the complainant is asking. Usually it's like resignation, money, etc., things that are usually off the table in the first place. So again, I think it'll just show that that informal resolution process doesn't work between those two individuals once we do that.
I will add that developing settlement guidelines is something other ethics commissions do. That's not a new creation. Also, other regulatory entities do the same thing. Sometimes they're internal. I think being transparent about them and providing them to the public and providing them to people who may be filing complaints would be helpful. But again, is going to affect the informal resolution between the complainant and the respondent. So.
Any questions on guidelines, settlement guideline type issues?
So these will be future taskers, or it's kind of like projects for us to work on? Okay.
Yeah, these are the things that we're going to have to focus on.
Okay.
Just very specific action items, not big picture,
Right.
right, things, but as a consequence of this legislation, in order to give effect to it, we're going to have to do some of these things. Now, we could just, I'll be honest, we could just willy-nilly start, it's probably not the appropriate term, but we could just, for whatever reason, start, settling cases. But to do that without a guideline
Right.
or a guidepost isn't probably a responsible thing. And it also, doesn't set the expectations. So that's why I would suggest that we do that, or that the commission does that. And then we can enter into that informal resolution process with the respondents.
Yeah, I think we'll probably call them something different. So we know there's a distinction between the two, I guess, whatever it is, informal resolution between the complainant and the respondent, and then settlement negotiations with the commission, just so we're clear what those two distinctions are. The other thing with this change is it's an emergency provision, and we currently have a bunch of complaints that are pending. So we will need to go through them and as a commission and see which ones are good cases for potentially settling as the commission with the respondent. And I'm not completely sure what that's going to look like, whether we send them a letter and say, well, are you interested in potential settlement prior to us having these guidelines in place? If so, we'll have to pause those complaints until we adopt something standardized, because there are complaints that are similar issues. So we can go in and settle them, but we'll have to put a short pause on them until we have those standardized practices in place. But there are, in my opinion, quite a few cases that are probably
Right,
candidates.
right for resolution.
Candidates for informal resolution with commission rather than going through a lengthy investigation and doing the report and everything else that comes with it. But we'll evaluate those and then discuss them at meetings in the future.
Okay.
Okay, and then section 11. Now this is related to the criminal referral statute. So there's a couple things with this one. You'll see that on line 7 there, must is turned into may. So the commission will no longer have mandatory criminal referrals. Instead, it'll be discretionary criminal referrals whenever the commission believes it's, I don't want to say necessary, but
In the
it
interest
should,
of justice.
in the interest of justice, it should be criminally referred to whatever agency is the appropriate law enforcement agency.
What standard do you use to decide whether it goes to a state's attorney? Would you have, to be prosecuted, yeah, beyond a reasonable doubt, but what, would it be more likely than not a preponderance? Or what kind of standard for referral? Just curious.
Another good question, Murray. So currently, with the mandatory criminal referrals, the statute says believes. When the commission believes the complaint contains allegations of criminal conduct. So believes is not defined. It's not reasonably believes, it's believes. So what does that look like? Well, currently, it's if we get a complaint, it alleges a criminal act, or we discover something that sheds light on a criminal act. Is there corroborating information that could give rise to that? If so, then a state's attorney needs to be reviewing it, not the commission. That's how we operate under the believes standard
Forms of
currently.
belief.
Now that it's discretionary, again, this is an area where the commission will have to
Develop standards.
develop another standardized practice of, well, what does it look like? And
Yeah.
this one specifically, I think, should be, there's probably quite a few of these changes that need to be in the complaint rules. We'll have to revise the complaint rules with all of this taken into.
Somewhere between suspicion and beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
Yeah, and since it's discretionary, that's, again, more discretionary for the commission on what that looks like. Very lawyerly answer there, sorry.
No,
Just I was wondering.
And then moving along in that same section, on line 9, if the law enforcement agency agrees to accept a referral for possible criminal prosecution, now it's just for criminal prosecution. They're going to prosecute it. The commission may not take further action until that prosecution is complete. So if they say, yes, we're going to pursue this, okay, we will pause our review of it until that's complete. That's how that one changes. But then it kind of works in conjunction if you move down to line 13, the underlined language. If the law enforcement agency takes no action on the referral for prosecution within 60 days, the commission may resume its review of the complaint. So let's say we refer a hypothetical complaint to a state's attorney and we haven't heard anything for 3 months because that's outside, or we can't get any information from them, they won't respond to us, what have you. If it's outside 60 days, we can just resume our investigation or review whatever it is to close out the complaint, so we're not waiting on somebody else that we have no control over.
Issue a subpoena, bring them in.
They didn't put that in.
I don't want to nitpick here, but so if 60 days have passed and you resume, Then the state's attorney says, well, 90 days have passed, we've decided to prosecute. Do we have to go back up to line 8 and say, if the law enforcement agency agrees to accept a referral for criminal prosecution, the commission may not take further action until.
I
See
believe,
where-
yep,
you see
I
where
believe
we
we would have to.
Just have to stop, right?
And that would, again, be in the best interest of justice because if it's related to ethical conduct, the commission would likely want to see what the outcome of the criminal case is anyway, because it may impact the complaint review when the commission gets it back. So it'd be a best practice regardless of.
And to carry that a little bit further, if there is a prosecution and an acquittal, because you couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt, could the commission still resume and continue because it may be a different standard?
Yes,
Yeah, it depends what the commission's looking into. So there would have to be a rule or a civil violation there. It wouldn't be the criminal violation.
it reminds me of the O.J. Simpson trial, right? There was no criminal liability, but then they were able to find civil liability.
But there needs to be something civil that attaches
Yeah.
outside the criminal. And we'll demonstrate that in the complaint, the mock.
The mock complaint this afternoon, yes. But, so as a consequence of section 11, what I suggest the commission do is two things, which get to the heart of what Murray discussed, is one, develop standards for those discretionary criminal review. What standard are we going to apply? What level of proof does the commission need before it moves for that criminal referral or does that? And then also outlining the circumstances and the fact patterns of when we recommence, so that those are also standardized and we have a policy that we can refer to, whether that's in a rule or a policy. I think we'll have to discuss that. But again, I'm thinking a rule as well. But having those developed so that we are applying them equitably across the board is something that we're going to have to do, particularly since there's that discretionary review. And we may have to define what forming a belief is, what that actually means.
When you want to exercise your discretion.
Yes.
To reverse.
Yep.
Move on to section 12. This one gets a little hard to explain. Because I feel like it was a last minute change from what was there before in the proposal from the House. Because it was part of that 180 days section that they had previously suggested including, but if you look at starting on line 29 at the bottom of page 8, upon completion of an investigation, the executive director shall prepare a report and recommendation to the commission to close the matter or issue an alleged violation. Commission may issue an alleged violation, require additional investigation, or close the matter. So currently, when a report and recommendation is prepared, it includes all the investigation findings with a recommendation to the commission for how to resolve the matter. Not with the understanding that there's going to be more to do in the complaint process. The investigation is complete, it's before the commission, you can make a final decision. So we were perplexed when this language was included with the 180-day language because it really is talking about two different processes. This was borrowed from the proposal in 1360 and found its way in here some way with 180 days, and the House was keen on keeping this, and I'm not sure why. Because I think it adds a little red tape to the process because it's throwing an additional step in there that's really not contemplated by the original complaint process. So what we tentatively came up with, how this would work, is once the report and recommendation is completed, instead of it being before the commission for final action, there would be a request in there that the commission either believes the report and recommendation contains enough that there is a violation. So in that instance, you would issue an alleged violation and set the hearing on the rest of the report, on the findings in the report, or maybe the commission believes that there's not enough in the report, so the commission could direct additional investigation at that time, or the commission could do what it currently can do and close the matter. So instead of a final determination by the commission, it's kind of, I don't even know,
An interim step.
an interim step before you get to the final hearing. Again, I think it's just a little bit more, I use the term red tape, but it's an additional procedural hurdle that the commission will have to take into account. And then you have the final hearing, or maybe there is some additional investigation that needs to take place. But I don't see what it necessarily does to speed up the complaint process, because it still requires that report and recommendation. So it's in there, we'll work with it. This piece is not an emergency provision, so that doesn't go into effect for a little while, but also we'll have to rework the complaint rules to take that into account.
Any questions on that one?
You're right, it's complicated.
Yeah, I think it was, it was originally intended to be in House Bill 1360 when we had kind of this completely new, different process. And I think it just got brought over from 1360 and introduced in the House. And my impression was that nobody really had thought it through or understood. We had pointed it out to the legislators once they got into their conference committee, but they were so focused on other fundamental things that they couldn't, they kind of, out of sight, out of mind type thing with this one.
Yeah, and
Until the last day.
well, the last conference committee, they had me stand up there and testify, and it did not make sense in the context where it was a separate section. So they asked, I believe they asked me, well, if we move it up here, does it make sense? And yes, it can work. It's just, I don't know what efficiencies it creates. So that's where it ended up. But
It's going to delay the process slightly.
yes, it'll add more work for the five of you to pick one of those things. Are we doing an alleged violation for a final hearing? Are we requesting additional investigation? Are we closing it before we even have a hearing? It's just one extra step. And then if you move to lines 19 and 20, the respondent may petition the commission at any time to dismiss the complaint in the manner prescribed by the commission. This was also kind of a late add, but it's really, they could do this anyway. They could request the commission dismiss something. It's just adding that formality that they can essentially file a motion to dismiss the complaint. And when we do rules revision, we'll put processes in place for how they do that.
So that's another action item, is that we're going to have to develop a procedure for a respondent to petition the commission to dismiss a complaint. It does say at any time, so this was not very articulated as to when this needs to happen. So we need to make sure that we adopt a procedure that could apply during, initial review versus informal resolution or during investigation.
They asked me, and I suggested that language because that's currently what they can do. I want the commission to dismiss it, and I think we've had that happen where somebody, it's less formal. It's usually like an email that somebody will send. Well, I think the commission should, well, thank you for your response. It'll be part of the consideration moving forward.
Yep.
All this does is formalize that.
Ron?
At some point today, we've talked about emergency provisions, as indicated in Part 18. But then didn't you say that the whole bill is now an emergency bill.
Rebecca Deb, I think she's correct that.
Okay,
It's not an emergency,
Well,
it's an
because it's
appropriation
appropriations, it's not the August 1st deadline, it's the fiscal
deadline.
deadline, which is July 1st. So it's a month earlier. I don't know if that makes much difference, but
well, does it make any difference in terms of the work we have to do on these various things?
Timeline-wise.
If the whole
by a
thing is,
month. It's such a mixed bag though, because you have some that are going to become law immediately, assuming the governor signs them, and some that aren't. So there's things that we'll have to address right away anyway, so we can just do a full on, well, we'll address everything at once.
okay,
Instead of doing it piecemeal.
Now, what that looks like as far as proposed rules or not, that might have to be split up. Like one might be complaint rules. If there is an informal guidance rule, maybe that's separate. What have you. That makes sense. Section 13, again, that's just accused individual and respondent. No big change there. Section 14, which is also an emergency provision. Most of it is accused individual to respondent, with the exception of subsection 4 starting on line 23 on page 10. Information deemed confidential in subsections 1 and 2 may be disclosed by the respondent. So they fix the problem. One of the problems, the confidentiality provisions, now a respondent can publicly speak about a complaint. The statute didn't contemplate that before, but we have previously flagged that as a First Amendment issue, so that was a good change they adopted.
So I think this is a question that I'll be honest, I haven't spoke with Logan about. So that actually just came to mind as I was reading this with how the language is in this. That if the information that has been deemed confidential may be disclosed by the respondent and the Ethics Commission if the respondent agrees to the disclosure. So one of the questions that we're going to have to answer is if the respondent is publicly responding, does that then open up the entire case? And I think that is a question that we're going to have to address. And maybe not even the entire case, but to what extent, if the respondent is providing information to the public, is the Ethics Commission also permitted, or should they be providing information to the public as well? Does that create more of a public process? And again, Logan's looking at me because I didn't ask him about this previous to the meeting,
Well,
but
the corollary to your question is the information is still confidential since it's been publicly disclosed in a legal way.
Yep.
I don't know.
okay.
I don't have an answer for you today.
I didn't expect him to have an answer for me, but just something that we probably need to consider as respondents start disclosing or providing information.
And I guess
Is there agreement, or by them providing it?
another step, even if there is, does the commission want to consider it that way?
Yeah.
And have an open complaint process, or should the commission consider it that way?
Yes.
Go back to, just be hungry or something, but what are the rules for the complainant disclosing? And why are there two different things? And shouldn't it be the same thing?
It is now.
Okay, this is what fixes that. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
It gets a little odd with the complainant
Yeah.
because the way the penalty is for confidential information is if you're a government employee and you learn it through your government employment. Now, if you're just a citizen who's filing something, you already speak because the penalty doesn't apply to you as a non-government employee. So, yes, this does change it. That's a good point. That both sides can speak about it. Unless it's a complainant who learned something through their employment and is filing it because they're a public servant, then it gets a little murky. But that's not really for us to advise or tell them otherwise on. That's really
So what if it's two legislators?
A complainant and a respondent, depending on, for the complainant, if they learned it through their service or through their employment, they would not be able to speak about it, correct? And then, but if the respondent is a legislator, they would be able to.
There's some concerns there as well, but also not so much for us because the commission wouldn't be the one prosecuting somebody for violating that statute. And the more prevalent concern is the respondent. If that was a liability for the commission.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that just a little bit? Why having the respondent being able to talk is, or maybe you did already. Did you already talk about the First Amendment issue that we have with that?
It's just,
We
there's
had
other,
First Amendment concerns.
Yeah. There's case law where other states have, this has been on the complainant side for the most part, where they tried to, it's like a legislative gag order, like you can't speak about this, where it's been unconstitutional. So we identified it as an issue. It was part of 1360. I'm glad for the commission's sake to see it fixed and stuff.
Yep. Yep, that's what I wanted you to say.
Second,
I noticed that you had your hand behind you. You were manipulating something.
No, that, for those listening, no, that is not the case.
Section 15, again, this is another emergency section. This is really unique to the legislature because it's just, I shouldn't say it's just, but it's directing them how to adopt their conflict of interest rules. So it takes out the words direct and substantial for what is a legislative conflict of interest. And this is really the byproduct of us working for many months with legislative council on the legislative rules. So no concerns there really. It'll just be interesting to see what the Senate does because I believe their rules still use all 4 words and they're not in session currently, but they're also required to do this. So going into the interim, I don't know what they'll do, but we will watch and work with them.
Any bets on what they'll do?
No. We don't bet at the Ethics Commission. So I did want to make a comment about the word direct and substantial, the reason why those were removed in discussions with Legislative Council. The use of the word direct, we think it gave a false sense of security, that it had to be directly to the person, that there was nothing intervening. While there is nearly in every piece of legislation that a member or a legislator may have a potential conflict of interest, there is an intervening action that is required. That does not mean that they don't have a conflict.
I think the definition that they were using, we had a concern that it was written so broadly that even the governor signing the bill could be considered an intervening action. So then direct is out, therefore it's not a conflict. And that's not really how conflicts of interest work.
Hence why the word direct was removed. And then we removed the word substantial because substantial is very difficult to define. What is substantial to Ron might be different than what is substantial to Cindy. So we removed that qualifying or qualitative piece of information and just left it with unique and individual. So it's unique to them, and unique and individual are almost the same thing as well, but those are also defined in the rules. So hence the language change there. Again, just want to emphasize the number of conversations that were had on 3 words. The removal of 3 words or the changing of 3 words.
That's why it's important to have attorneys looking at this.
Yes,
Yeah.
some would argue the contrary.
We'll just wrap up here quickly because we don't have much left to go through. Section 16, complaint management time standards. The commission shall adopt rules for the efficient and timely disposition of complaints from receipt to resolution. This section came up in the context of that 180 days discussion, because our position has been and will continue to be that that's not a permissive restriction, a timeline like that on the commission's investigative authority. But there may be instances where we can be more public about how complaints are moving through the process and the timelines for such, given the confidentiality provisions. So this section is modeled after what the court already does. The Supreme Court adopts rules for how district courts can manage their cases and what those timelines look like, and what they set goals for when certain percentages of cases should be completed, 50, 100, 25, I believe. So we'll look at this. It'll be part of the complaint rules. What are the time goals we want to set for each stage and the new stages that are included with the bill? To be determined in the complaint rules, and this one's also not emergency. And I believe we have 9 months to come up with something for that one. Section 17, annual report. This formalizes that the commission shall provide an annual report each fiscal year. This is a standard practice of ethics commissions around the country. And then section 3, subsection 3 on the last page here, says the commission can include recommendations for newer revised laws, rules, or policies that could improve the confidence that North Dakota citizens have in their government. So it'll be a brainstorming session for the 5 of you on what that may look like.
And it may include issues like campaign financing, a wide variety of things, all with a possible ethics related connection.
Yep.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, maybe be careful, but it was written fairly broadly.
And it may include, it's not mandatory,
It's
but
not
I'm sure the
mandatory.
commission will have some suggestions when the time comes.
It's also very common for other ethics commissions to make recommendations to the legislature about what rules or laws need to be changed. So it is a common practice across the country.
And nothing stopped the commission from doing that before. It's just codified here.
And just to let the commission know, we did provide an annual report. It was provided to the Interim Judiciary Committee in September of 2024. So we actually already do this. This just puts it in code. Last time it was also in our appropriations bill. It was in there, but it was a one-time, and it was specific to last time. The report that we provided to the interim committee was specific as to how the FTE of having a part attorney, part educator was going and how that met the need. And so what we provided to them in September was, yes, this was a good idea, but we still have a lot of work that we have to do on this, and that we were going to be asking for an education FTE. So we already did that. That's why we thought that this also established a timeline for when this was going to be done within 60 days at the end of each fiscal year. So that way it allowed us to wrap up our fiscal year and then produce a report. It just it clarified what needs to be included in there. One of the things that we're going to have to do is create a schedule or a format for when our annual report is to be issued. We will come up with that at the end of this fiscal year as we go into those 60 days. There is a lot to digest in Senate Bill 2004, the appropriation as well as the policy. There's 2 other things I want to make notes on for the commission is that, and this was not in the policy section, but this leads into our next item on our agenda is really we need to discuss, or you need to discuss as the commission, I'm asking to discuss the impact of a lack of education or communication funding for the commission's ongoing educational efforts. That is something that we need to have an open honest discussion about how is that lack of funding going to affect our educational and training efforts. And then the other thing that I wanted to just, maybe Dave, I don't know if you want to talk about it or I can too, that in the context of all of these changes with Senate Bill 2004, as we were talking about it during our pre-meeting and leading up to it, Chair Anderson has asked Logan to prepare a legal memo for the commission. And it's specific as to covering the commission's constitutional duties and authority, the impact of Senate Bill 2004 on our internal processes and procedures. We've kind of already talked about some of that, but in the context, looking at the impact of our procedure on our procedures and policies in the context of the constitutional duties and authority that the commission has, and then evaluating potential actions that the commission has regarding the same. So it's kind of a legal memo summarizing all of the brief discussion points that we made.
It's designed to show the issues that what the legislature traded for us. So Logan will prepare a memo to describe exactly how it impacted us. And it's not just budget, but when they added policy to the budget bill, that complicated matters. So I've asked Logan to write up something to describe that so that the public understands that the legislative actions, what it does to our ability to execute our work. And it's in some ways put obstacles in front of us. So we need to point those out.
Talked about it, but is this unusual for them to insert the policy stuff into a budget bill?
I think Murray should lead into that.
It's unconstitutional but usual.
Yeah. Can we find out?
I'm not trying to be flippant about it.
Yeah.
But here's what the Constitution says. I just happen to have this. I didn't prompt you. No law may be enacted except by a bill passed by both houses, and no bill may be amended on its passage through either house in a manner which changes the subject matter. So the subject matter of 2004 is an appropriation bill, but there are provisions, criminal law section in there. So 12.1, Title 12.1 is a criminal law. Chapter 5503 deals with something else. And no bill may embrace more than one subject, which must be expressed in the title. So what used to happen in the past is that you had these long Christmas tree bills. And now what the legislature does is this, my personal opinion, is putting smaller chunks in different bills, but still doing it in a different manner.
All right, so we have directed our legal counsel, our staff person, to do this.
To kind of write how this impacts us.
But
What you just asked
can we just articulate that, my question, and you respond that? For me, I want to call them out. What are you doing here? Okay, fine, we're going to do this, we're following this.
I'm looking forward to Logan's memo. That's what I'm looking for.
So Cindy, I just want to make sure you want to be sure in this memo that we include the constitutionality issue of Senate Bill 2004. I think that's doable.
Well, for me, it's my frustration in these processes. My observation of this particular session in that, and we had good things going with those two bills that didn't go. And then here now that pieces of them are, for me, thrown into this one. What are you doing here? You know, we kind of agreed, and yes, and it's not bad. It's just, I'm questioning strategy, tactics, because, well, wait a minute here. And they, to me, it's like, and last minute, whatever, but they could have gone about this better. You know,
Always.
I mean, you know, and we were there, our staff were there, you know.
Cynthia, part of the issues that conflict with the transparency is that a bill may be introduced, a bill is introduced, there's a hearing on the bill, then it goes into the work session, and things are taken out of the bill and things are put into the bill that are not subject to the hearing. And then at the end of the session, it goes to the conference committee. And there are things done in the conference committee where there are never the subject of a hearing. So that's part of the transparency process that for 20-some sessions I've observed. And a lot of action is done in the work sessions, and a lot of action used to be done particularly in the conference committees, because that's where you see a lot of things just shoveled in. I shouldn't be so frank.
Well, that's what happened with our bill. I mean, that's the way it was. It's not a Christmas tree bill, it's more like a Thanksgiving bill where more stuff is added into the turkey. Onions, sage.
All right, thank you for.
So can I just add one more thing? The portions of 1505 that ended up in the commission's bill, the immunity provisions, so sections 4 and 5, they did not get through. They were, do you want to say rejected by the House? And then they were resurrected in our bill. So exactly what Murray was talking about.
So the two bills that were introduced in the House, 1505 and 1277, right?
1360?
Well, the one bill
Was 1277.
Oh, it was
And
1277.
then
You're right, Murray. It got withdrawn.
And then it came back as 1505.
1277 was withdrawn, but 1505 was killed in the House 9-84. Only 5 votes in favor, but those provisions ended up in the appropriation bill. So what you're doing is that, this is my observations again, what you're doing is that you're downplaying the role of the policy committees, and you're giving more and more authority to the appropriations committees. And often the appropriations bills are voted on toward the end of the session, and the policy bills are killed earlier in the session, but they're resurrected in the appropriation. Just an observation from one person.
I think it's factual as to what happened in our bill, though.
We were asked in committee if there was policy provisions that should be included in the budget bill. And our response at the time was, well, the commission needs to evaluate these things given the House killing 1360 and 1505. And I guess it became very clear shortly thereafter that there was going to be policy in it, regardless if the commission worked with them or not to do it.
Well, they specifically asked us to bring policy.
Yeah.
And we said, no, we're not going to put policy in our budget bill. We wanted a clean
What's the
budget bill.
commission stance then?
Proposed amendments to Senate Bill 2004 were drafted even prior to the hearing in the House Appropriations Committee.
They were. Our hearing was March 18th for the first time, and the amendments that were eventually adopted by the House Appropriations E&E Division were drafted on March 13th. But not presented until April 8th.
So for me, again, by asking the question, I would like that part of the memo. Okay, and we're directing you, Logan, to do that, but I'm asking and addressing this as a commissioner.
We can do that.
Bring the light of day to that process. And how it affected us. So. Okay, is this a good time for a break? Where we're at is any more than degree.
We have 1469, but we can wait on 1469 until, it's gonna probably take us a solid half hour to get through 1469.
Okay. So thoughts on,
15 minutes. I'm a bad evaluator of time.
so do you want to do that first and get that out? So take a break, lunch break. So what's everyone's desires in a lunch break? The cafe here is not heavy duty, but
Murray says it's pretty good though.
Yeah, I think you'll be one.
in that little cafe on the corner.
Yeah.
Am I thinking the one where the pop machines are at, that cafe?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Oh, the one at the Heritage Center?
yeah.
Tanner,
Are you guys talking about the one in the,
no, talking about this one.
this one here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tanner is our guy that's working there.
Oh, okay.
The intern came over here a lot for lunch. He loved the sandwiches.
Oh, good.
Actually have a good service.
That's good enough for me. I like it. So we'll take, how long do we need? Do we come back at 1? Yep. Okay, let's come back at 1, please.
1 o'clock.
And we'll take a lunch break.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.